We're going to go over 2 chapters from this book. And you can see it's well loved by me. I'm learning a lot, but it's Teaching for Learning. And the way it's organized is each chapter has a specific method of reaching our students. It will present research on that method, the good, the bad, and ugly. Then it will give us some best practices that are supported by the research. And then it launches into what they call ideas, which are specific activities using that mode of teaching. And so what I'm going to do is give you just a brief coverage of the research for each chapter, and then we're going to launch into the specific tips. And then you guys will be voting in on which ones you think sound best, and then I'm going to challenge you to share with your colleagues the ways that you think you might be able to implement your favorite method in your own classes. That, hands down, has been the best part of every Computerside chat, when I shut up and you guys talk. So I promise we will unmute you guys, or you guys can chat in your thoughts many times. This will be very much more interactive than it feels at the moment. So I did already mention, but I want to say this for anybody who's joined us more recently. We do keep you guys muted just so it doesn't get really loud in here, because I've got a speaker where your voices will be projected. Anytime you want to catch my attention or you want to say something, you can either unmute yourself and speak, or just send a chat, and I have my chat window open so I'll be able to see it. And we will be unmuting everybody when we get to these more interactive points, so that you can choose to either speak your responses or chat in your response. So Jared, if you can unmute everybody for a second, I want to see if anybody has questions or concerns before we get started. And I want to give everybody a chance to say hi. Hello.
Hi, this is Helena. How are you, Missy?
Hi, Helena. I'm great. Thanks for joining us.
This is a great idea. This is Charlene.
I recognize your voice, Charlene. Welcome. Thanks. Who else is out there?
It's Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Hi.
Good to hear your voice.
Nice to be here.
Anybody have any concerns or want to say hi? Because I think we've got some more folks. I haven't heard from Carrie. Carrie, are you out there?
I'm here.
Hey, Carrie. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this sounds like fun.
I think it will be. You guys will tell me if it's not, and then we'll fix it. All right, so I see also Michelle. I'm assuming it's Michelle James because you have the 1L. Is that correct? Michelle, are you out there? Okay, well, maybe she's stepped away for a moment. All right, so we've got Sandra and Nancy. You guys are, oh, Michelle, I see. I got your chat. Gotcha. Michelle's having mic issues. So, Sandra?
Sandra, here.
Hi, Sandra. Thanks for
Nancy.
Hi, good afternoon.
Nancy, is that you?
Yes, this is Nancy.
All right, cool. Thank you for coming. And then we already heard from Charlene and Hector. So, Jose, are you out there?
I am here, yes.
Hey, all right. Well, welcome. Looks like we've got everybody. Oh, Terry. Terry, are you out there too? Oh, Terry. Okay. Terry's also having mic issues. It's okay. It's really actually fine if we do the chat in too. So before I go any further, I want to, we're going to go ahead and mute you guys again. Before I go on, I do want to just put something out there. We are filming these sessions, and I've filmed all of them just to kind of give me feedback on how things go. But I've been getting requests from people who aren't able to make the chats. They are interested in me putting the recorded versions of these online so people can see them after the fact and participate kind of asynchronously. I know that it won't be the same because they won't get to share their thoughts, but I want to know if you guys feel comfortable with me putting this online for other people to access, because I want to be upfront about the idea. Your chats would be available, not the ones that you're sending me privately or sending Jared privately, but the ones you send to everybody. Those will be captured on the WebEx recording, and then obviously any audio that you contribute. So if any of you feel like, man, I don't really want to be remembered permanently in this way, please let us know about that. But if you think it's an okay idea, go ahead and maybe consent so I can get a sense of where you guys are on whether we should put this online or not. And I really will leave it up to you because I'm not going to put anybody online if they're not okay with it. So just kind of keep that in your mind, and I will come back to it later. So, all right, so a couple of you are chatting in, and thank you for letting me know. All right, so we are going to get started. Oh, Sam, hi. Are you back in Texas, I wonder? You should chat me. Tell me if you're back in Texas. Okay, so we are going to, actually, I'm going to skip the next couple of slides. We are going to cover 2 chapters today as advertised. We're going to do chapter 3, which is on reciprocal peer teaching, and we'll do chapter 4, which is on academic games. And so we're going to start with reciprocal peer teaching, and I just want to share you some information that the book covers that may help you get your head around exactly what they're talking about. So the big deal here is any teaching method that requires peer-to-peer interaction. And generally, what you're going to be looking for is one student will teach another student at one point, and then they'll turn around and reciprocate. So there are many, many different ways to do this, and research is suggesting that it's really valuable because students tend to take ownership of the material before they present it, and this inspires them to engage in a kind of deeper level of processing that improves retention and also student engagement. So that's really the big deal about reciprocal peer teaching, and I hope as we talk about the research and we talk about the specific methods, you guys will see why it might be something you'd be interested in adding to your courses if you don't do it already. So, oh my gosh, so Sam is still in Romania. That's pretty cool. And so I guess, wow, we now have our farthest reach for Computerside chats than we've ever had before. All right, so that's what we're going to start with today on the reciprocal peer teaching. I'm going to give you some basics about it for those of you to whom this is a new teaching method. There are 5 general steps that you'll find in every version of reciprocal peer teaching, and they're up there on the screen for you. So the first is the preparation phase, and this is for the students. Whatever you have to do as an instructor behind the scenes, we're not counting that right now. These are the steps that the students will engage in. First, you will generally give them time to prepare, whether that is reading over some course material, getting their head around exactly what it is that they're responsible for, or spending time in groups, because a lot of these methods can be done individually or in groups. So they might be just spending time in groups figuring out what they are going to do together. After the preparation phase, students will share what they've learned by teaching their peers, and that's the share section. Then generally there's some time for everybody to talk it through and make sure that the information makes sense. They call that the synthesis or the synthesizing phase. Then those first 3 steps are repeated by the other team. So now the other students will have a chance to share and then synthesize. And then at the end, usually you want to bring the entire class together for some time to reflect. And that is a really important part of this process because it gives you the opportunity to catch errors in thinking. One of my favorite parts of it is it really gives you the opportunity to make sure the message that you're sharing with your students or that they're sharing with each other is the message that they've all received. So it's really powerful if you do take the time to reflect afterwards. So for those of you who joined us for session 1, where we'll be covering some other methods, this method does require a bit more pre-preparation on the side of the instructor than some of the other methods we covered before. So this is not going to be the kind of method where you can just keep it in your back pocket and then just bring it into class on the fly. Some of the other techniques were like that. This one you're probably going to have to do a bit more planning so you have materials to present to the students before they teach each other. So it's just important to be aware of that, and maybe you guys will come up with tweaks that do allow you to bring it in whenever you feel the need, but that's just something to be aware of. And then some of the research says that this method is something that is adored by students. Even if they initially report that they are afraid to have to teach their colleagues, once they've done it, they really feel that it improves their learning. And then research also says in some cases it does seem to improve learning. In other cases, it doesn't change it in any way, but there's no research to suggest that this is ever a detriment. So at worst, you're not changing their learning, but you're making them feel engaged and they're enjoying the process. And at best, they're enjoying the process and their learning is improving. So I'm going to say it's probably a good thing to try out. So before I go on, if anybody has any questions or concerns, go ahead and take a minute to either chat them in to me or unmute yourself and let me know your thoughts. Anybody? I'm just every once in a while checking my clock to make sure I'm doing okay. I'm not chatting on my phone with anybody, I promise. All right, so I'm going to assume that we're good. We're going to move on. Okay, so now to best practices. And this is a section of the book that I really like. The authors do a great job of letting us know what research says about how to use these in your classes. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is maybe just take a note or two about each of these best practices so that when we're talking about the specific tips, you can think and reflect on which of these best practices are highlighted in the actual methods that we've selected. So that's the plan. All right, so we're going to start with finding one. I believe in this chapter I remember that there are 4 best practices. So the first one, and the quote from the book, is appropriate preparation for the teaching phase improves learning. This probably is a no-brainer to all of you guys, but in that list of 5 things that students need to do, that preparation phase is not something to skip. If you just ask students to jump in immediately and start teaching each other, if they haven't had time to consider how they're going to teach or consider the goals of the activity, it seems to cause problems in the process. So I'm going to encourage you always, always to not skip that step. And in addition to the fact that it just makes sense, research suggests that students can feel it, that if you ask students to jump into teaching before they are able to prepare, they don't enjoy the task as much. And if one of the major points of using this is to increase student engagement and get them to like the learning process, you're, kicking yourself for not giving them time to prepare. So again, just want to make sure everybody knows you've got to give them time to interact with the material, focus on the goal, and figure out how they're going to attack that goal. Okay? So I'm going to move on to the next one. If there's any questions, please chat in, unmute yourself. But I want to get through these so that we can get to the fun part where we talk about the teaching tips. So finding 2, structured tasks for teachers and learners improve learning. So the idea is that if you go in and you do not give students clear activities that support this process, it stresses them out. If they don't know exactly what's going to be expected of them in the teaching phase, then it causes them to feel challenged in an uncomfortable way. So this is why that preparation on your side is going to be so important. You may want to prepare a handout or at the very least a slide or something to make very clear exactly what students are expected to do. And it also keeps you on task for you to know about how long you're going to give your students to prepare. If you've thought that through ahead of time, it really seems to work better for everybody. So if you want to make the best use of this method, I'm going to encourage you to, you have to do a little homework here too. All right. So finding 3, individual and group accountability for the results of the process improves learning. So this just comes back to that old adage of students don't do optional. If you just tell students that they're going to be responsible for teaching each other, you might think that the embarrassment of failing to do a good job would be enough. Turns out no. You really want to tie something to it. So it could be a low-stakes assessment. You can give just a few points. You can make it worth extra credit, but students really need to know that there is a level of accountability. One of the suggestions is if you're doing this in a group format, which you're going to hear shortly is probably the best method to go with, that it's a good idea to make individual scores be a part of the group assessment. So you tell everybody up front, you each are going to be scored individually, and that'll make up your group score, rather than allowing people to engage in social loafing. You know, you don't want a couple of people to get really engaged with the process and then other people to just tune out. So really hold them accountable and ask them to participate in the group. Another thing that I thought was interesting, and it makes a lot of sense, but maybe if we didn't see it in writing, we wouldn't think about it. Sometimes you could have a task where you ask each student separately to participate in a specific section. So, hey, maybe you're going to be responsible for pages 1 through 5, and student 2 is going to be responsible for pages 5 through 10. If you do that, if you break it up that way, then students really get deeply engaged with only their material. So they encourage us to get students to interact with all of the material and say, you're going to be responsible for this one point, but I'm going to give you time to share with each other before you go which parts of everything you think are most important, so that your colleagues will hear your perspective on all the different parts. So it's just important to, again, keep them accountable and let them know that they need to cover all the material, even if they're only personally responsible for one part. So any questions on the first 3 findings? Looking at the chat window. All right, looks like we're good so far. So the final finding, groups typically outperform individuals in answering questions correctly. Now, this research finding is not necessarily just from the reciprocal peer teaching research. It's just something that we find again and again. So if students are given the opportunity to take an exam on their own, they'll score at a lower level than if you give those same students the ability to take an exam as a group. And while you may not want to investigate the possibility of group exams in your class if it doesn't work for you, you can harness this power by doing reciprocal peer teaching. And so the idea is, if instead of doing individual reciprocal peer teaching, you do group reciprocal peer teaching, you have a team of people, each of whom can correct the others, and they can get to a better level of understanding as a group than they would have all by themselves. So harnessing the power of the group is something that's super valuable in reciprocal peer teaching. And in addition, it decreases the amount of time you're going to spend in class doing these activities, because instead of having to leave room for every individual to participate on their own, you just have to leave time for each group to educate the other groups. So I encourage you to consider using this as a group or collaborative activity rather than focusing on individuals. And then some of the actual tips that we're going to do harness that, and I think just maybe one doesn't. So any questions on any of these findings? Did you guys have enough time with all the slides to get a sense of what was going on? Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on. I can jump back easily, so if you want to catch one of these, please let me know. And, oh, I should let you know, at the conclusion of this, I will send everybody all of these slides. Sometimes we have to skip one or two, and then you'll, just get the benefit of all of them. Okay, so like I mentioned, the book is set up to have the research, and then they have sections that are called ideas, and it's cute. It stands for intentionally designed educational activities. Each chapter generally has about 15 ideas. There was no way we could cover 30 ideas in this session, so I think I've picked 3 for each chapter today. And so here you can take a peek. If you've got a copy of the book, you can follow along in there, but it's absolutely not necessary. But I've given you the page numbers and the names of the ideas. So we're going to be covering note-taking pairs, which is a little bit of a tweak on Think, Pair, Share, if you've ever used that in your class. We're going to cover the gallery walk, which basically asks different groups to contribute to teaching on a specific topic. And then clustering, which is aimed really at getting students to get a broad view of course material and to figure out how different parts of the course material can fit together in the big picture. So these are the ones I've selected. We're going to be covering note-taking pairs, the gallery walk, and clustering. So here's how we're going to do it. we're going to start with note-taking pairs, and you'll see this slide format is pretty much what you're going to see on each one. The top is just a basic snippet about what the cool thing is about this technique. Then I give you a sense of what you're going to have to do to prepare. So the preparation section is what you as the instructor will be responsible for doing. Process, that's what it's going to be in the classroom. So this is the step-by-step nuts and bolts of how to execute it in the classroom. And then the last part, for each of these, I'm going to ask you to gut check yourself and just your first gut reaction to this method. And if you'll chat it in and chat to everyone so we can all see the range of responses. One will be, this is not for me. I don't think I would use this in my class. It doesn't fit with the kinds of students I have or the material I cover. Or 5, wow, it would absolutely use this. I might try to use it next week. So anywhere in that range from 1 on the side of I kind of hate this to 5 on the side of I really love this. And I'm not going to be offended because I didn't come up with these. So yay. So we'll start with note-taking pairs. I wanted to see how many of you feel like your students struggle with being able to take good notes in your classes. And if you'll just chat in, let me know, yes or no. Yes, my students struggle. No, my students have this. They are all set. So Terry says yes. What else? How many of you find that note-taking is a challenge for your students? Helena agrees. Charlene says yes, and Liz, especially international and SAS students. Hector says it's average, it could improve. Anybody else? One thing I find when I invite my students to my office hours, and Nancy said yes, some don't even understand why they should take notes. That's something I actually find. If they've been told they should take notes, but they don't really know why, and so they don't know what good notes look like. They also think sometimes that just taking the notes is enough and that they never have to look at them again. So Sandra also says most don't take good notes. So I invite my students into my office hours, and I will invite them to share their notes with me. Then we can talk about whether they look good or not. And this idea is actually tweaking that, but asking students to look at each other's notes and then come up with a better set of notes together. So the big deal is you can use this method to increase the learning on your own learning objectives, but also to improve note-taking. So it's based on the idea that we should be giving mini lectures, not lecturing for hours and hours at a time. And so you're going to essentially create short snippets of information that you can present to your students in 10 to 15 minutes. That's really all the prep that this takes. So it's actually one of the less prep-heavy ideas. And then when you go into class, you're going to walk them through the process of helping each other improve their notes. And the way you do it is you start out saying, hey, today I'm going to do short lectures, and I don't want you to take notes. And I'm going to say that's something you can tweak. I think I'd probably prefer this if my students were taking notes, but the recommendation is say, just listen. And once you're done, you encourage them to take a few minutes to write their own notes down by themselves, and then you have students pair up, and in 5 minutes they get to look at each other's notes and go, oh, I didn't get that. Why do you think that's important? And they can teach each other, hey, this is why I pulled this out as an important idea, or here's why I wrote this way. So they have 5 minutes to do that, to share. You can circulate during that time, making sure you're not hearing any incorrect information, or maybe pointing out, hey, you guys, I hear you really spending a lot of time on that. I don't think that's one of the key points. So maybe move on to another one. And then after they've had time to pair up, they share with the entire class about what they thought were the most important points. You can just call on a few of the different pairs. Hey, what did you take from this? What did somebody forget but someone else caught? Hey, did anybody else miss that? And you give the entire class the chance to learn better note-taking skills through interacting with each other. So first off, if there are any questions about how this works, I want you guys to let me know. And if you feel like you've got a handle on how this works, go ahead and give me your gut check rating if you'd be willing to chat it to everybody. So again, 1 means this isn't going to work for me, and 5 is it's pretty useful. And while y'all are thinking, I'm going to say one of the reasons I picked this was the short prep time for the faculty member, but also I think very often as instructors we think we've shared a specific message and that students clearly know what we've said to them, and this can be really valuable for us to notice, oh my gosh, they picked up on totally different things, or I said this and they heard something completely different. So I think it can be valuable for us as well as for the students. So I'm looking to see what y'all are saying. So we've got some low to middling scores. Let's see. One concern from Helena is I have that my students will be lost because they don't remember much of what was covered. Yeah, that's why I wonder why, and I didn't feel like they explicitly said why they wanted students not to take notes at all at first. I think a possible tweak to eliminate that concern that Helena has is just let them take notes like normal. Say it's 10 to 15 minutes. Take your regular notes. Let's see how you did. So that might be something that you could try. Let's see, Nancy said, good for the beginning of the semester to get students started. So we've got a bunch of 3s. Many times, Carrie chatted this in privately, that many times students pair up with similar abilities and some don't get as much from the lecture as others. So if they're naturally sitting together in like ability pairs, a quick, easy way to handle this is to get them to work with somebody that they're not actually sitting with. So you could, you know, at the beginning of this, say, hey, I want everybody to just mix up, or I'm going to give you a partner. You can, you know, use any kind of pairing method you want. All right. So it looks like most people are kind of on the fence. This is seeming like it might be something you would try, but it's not making you all scream, woohoo. So that said, oh, Hector likes it a little better. I feel like it's got some real possibility, and what I want to encourage you guys to recognize is for all of these, this is like a smorgasbord approach, and you are the experts, so you know what you would need to make this work. Jose says it's hard to imagine this in a flipped class. So you know what, if students are taking notes on a lecture that you present electronically, so they've got a video of you as you would do in a flipped class, if you are making use of a discussion board, you could say, watch video number blah, 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 share your most important points on this discussion board post, and then have students comment on each other's posts. But you're right, it would take some tweaking to do it in a flipped class, but I think it would be doable. Or you could have students take notes at home, bring their notes into the classroom session, and then pair up as they would normally do, but once they're in the classroom. And that might benefit you by really holding students accountable for watching the out-of-class videos before they show up. So that might be something that would actually be useful for. So any other comments so far? All right. So I am going to move on to the next idea, which is idea 28, the gallery walk. And I love this one. I've actually used it in some of my own sessions that I do with my faculty colleagues. What's done here is generally you use those large poster papers, or you could do it just right on the whiteboard, but you essentially place questions strategically around the classroom. So there's enough space for a group of students to look at the question and interact with that material without disturbing other groups. So that's the big setup. So you have one group starting at each question, and then you call out time, and then they're going to rotate and move to another question. So the idea here is that they're working in groups, which we've already talked about can be a benefit. They have time to interact with the material. They can bring their notebooks with them or their text and look at the question and really deeply consider it, sharing with each other what they think the question is asking, because I have discovered sometimes we think we've written a brilliant, beautiful question and our students don't interpret it the way we think. so they can all work together to figure out what the question is asking, to figure out the evidence that they have to either support that or deny it or practice with it, and then you let them move on. So the preparation for this is you first have to figure out how much time you're going to use from your class period and divide that amount of time by the number of questions you're going to want to ask so you can set up a good strict timeline to ensure that you have time to do this. And then you prepare the prompts that you want. The book does recommend, and I'm going to say it's important, don't forget to leave in a little extra time for whole class discussion at the end. So you want to make sure that you have time to do all of that. And then you can either, write the questions. I brought these because I thought, if you had sticky notes of this size, you could just stick these on the wall and then put a piece of paper below it, or maybe stick these on your tables if that's easier for you, and then students can contribute a piece of paper and write their comments down below. Or you can use the large posters or the whiteboard, but if you are going to use this, you really do need to prepare your questions ahead of time. So that's the big thing. You want to get those squared away, and then bring markers or some kind of writing implement in case your students don't have them so they can contribute. So the process, you're going to hang the posters, you're going to form your teams, you give prep time for each question. Remember that preparation is super important. And then they look at the question, they start writing their responses, and they should come up with like a team name or, session one, something that identifies which group wrote that response. After the time you've allowed has elapsed, you say, okay, switch. And now they're going to go to the next question, they're going to prep for it, they're going to respond to it, and they're going to indicate which group did what. And they are going to actually do an additional step where they're going to look at the previous responses and add to it and say, oh, we like what group one said, or we really disagreed with group two. And so you get a record of the thought processes of all of the groups as they rotate through the room. And at the end, you have some time for each group to share out all of the information associated with their question with the whole class. You can challenge them to pick their favorite comments, to pick something that they found surprising. Whatever prompt you want to give them, then they have the opportunity to share with the entire class. And then in this day and age, if you want, you can give students time at the very end to walk around with their smartphones and photograph all of the comments, and then that's an easy takeaway from class for those students who are feeling tense that they couldn't take notes on this activity. So that's how this process works. So again, if you'll chat in your rating on this one, 1 being, oh, I hate this, and 5 being, I love this, then that'll be great, and we can see where everyone falls. And also, if you have questions, if I haven't explained it well enough, please let me know. And I've seen this, so Nancy says she uses this and they love it. Jose says he does something similar to it and gives it a 4. Sandra's liking it too, we got some 5s here. I've seen it used in math classes. You can put a specific math problem and then get students to talk about the steps that it took to solve it. For me, I could put a particular theorist up and ask students to explain how this theorist would handle a specific question that I've got on the board. So after walking around the classroom, each theorist and their belief system would be represented. Helena says she likes it and would use it. Terry says she'll try it in her math class. Carrie says it would be great, a review activity or case study. Time limits would be critical. Yeah, Carrie, actually last time in our first episode of this chat, I had some folks from the health sciences, and they said the same thing, that they could do a case study and have either a different case on each wall, or they could have the same case on the front, then with specific questions about the case on each poster. And one of our faculty members was so enamored of the idea that she shared it with her department and said, I will write it up, I will give you the questions so you can just implement it in class. And she had 2 of her colleagues who said, yeah, give me the materials, I'll run it. And they both said that the students liked it, that they liked it. So it seems like it's a pretty usable, doable method. Okay, so Hector says, interesting. Oh, Charlene said that she got to experience this in one of the Faculty Connection series events, so she liked it, maybe she could use it. So great. All right, so I'm going to encourage you, as you are writing down your gut check thoughts, keep in mind which of these seem to be your favorite, because I'm going to ask you to share how you can use it specifically in just a moment. Okay. So I am going to move on to our final idea for this chapter, which is idea 34, and this is called clustering. Something that I have been convinced of in my research on learning is that students tend to really handle materials so differently than experts do. We experts in our content area take a broad view. We very quickly and easily can assimilate new information because we have sort of a framework that lets us bring new information in very rapidly. Novice learners tend to just think of each fact that they get from a specific class as totally separate from every other fact. And because of that, it's really hard to memorize information or internalize information when it all seems so separate and so not related to each other. And so one of the things that we can do that serves our students so well is to teach them the expert perspective, to say, it's going to be hard to remember all of this if you don't come up with a way to connect it all together. And so this clustering activity is all about teaching your students how to connect and come up with an overarching framework that brings all of the material together. So it's really the big strength of this is that it's going to give students the chance to come up with connections for class concepts that work for them. So the way you prepare for this is you pick some bit of material that you have either presented to your students through a lecture, through readings, through whatever method you want, but you have a good chunk of information and you know that you want to get them involved in figuring out the framework, okay? And then you write each concept or idea, or we had an art teacher last time who said you could put images of specific art pieces on each card and then challenge them to figure out which historical movements, which historical art movements are being represented by getting them to connect those things together. So there's so many different things that you could do. If you're a math teacher, you could potentially put a bunch of different math problems and you're going to challenge students to figure out, hey, which of these problems hang together? Which of these would you use the same method to solve them? For myself, I could, when I teach human development, I could talk about some different developmental stages, but see if students can connect them together, especially from different theorists or different approaches. So your job really is going to be to pick the breadth of the material that you want them to attack and then to come up with specific instances or parts of that material that you're going to represent on individual index cards or pieces of paper, whatever you've got. So when class starts, you give each student one card and they get 3 minutes or some other amount of time you like to take some time looking over the reading, reviewing their notes, thinking about what that card has to do with what they've been covering in the past. That's their preparation phase. And then you give them time to move around. And I love that about the gallery walk, and I love that about this, getting students out of their chairs so they can move. You just tell them to walk around and find a classmate. And when 2 classmates come together, they can tell each other a little bit about their cards. So I might say, oh, I've got this, I've got this piece of art. I'm going to say the shading is interesting or whatever. And then the other student says, oh, I've got this piece of art and it's got totally different types of brush strokes or whatever. If you were going to do this with a case study approach, you could maybe have symptoms of an illness and, maybe you could go, oh, these 2 symptoms I don't think they connect at all. But during those little meetups, students have a chance to tell the other students a little bit about their own information because they had time to prep on it. So as they're walking around, if they meet up with somebody that they think both facts are somehow connected, they join up, and now they're going to walk around the room together. okay? So that's why it's called clustering. You start with individuals, but now they're going to meet up and they're going to try to connect their two cards together. And you just, once there's two, they're going to go and find another person and see if they could join the cluster or not. You could even have two groups of two that decide that they are a bigger cluster together. But after you've seen the size of clusters get to a level that you're happy with, you stop. And then you say, all right, each cluster, I want you to come up with a name for yourself. What is an overarching term that you could use to connect all of you together? And then they have to share out to the entire class and explain why they think all their cards hold together and why they picked their name. And at this point, students can, grab their notebooks, they can record all the different clusters, and they can explain other connections that they see. Like maybe they could go, well, y'all didn't meet up with each other, but you could have been in one cluster together. But giving students a chance to get that big picture view really leads them far along on the pathway to becoming experts in the field and at least looking at material like an expert would instead of like a newbie would. And so I really like it. Another thing that's great in the sharing out component is if you feel like students have really just missed the mark, or if you feel like, oh, you know what, it turns out there are terms for some of those clusters in my field. Let me tell you what those terms are. Now you're exploring some themes that they didn't even know about before. So I'm going to say this can be a really good way to attack bringing students to a higher level of understanding. So again, if you have questions, chat them into me. Also, gut check. So 1, you're hating this. 5, you're loving this. And again, it's not going to hurt my feelings because I didn't make them up. So. All right, so Jose seems to like it. Hector likes it. We're getting some good responses to this one as well. Need to try it. Sounds good for an end-of-unit review, says Liz. And yeah, what a great way to do an exam review. Making sure that they have really good things to hang their new knowledge on so that when they come to an exam, they're not struggling with all these disparate pieces of information. Carrie says you've used this for pharmacology, had mixed results. One group loved it, the other didn't really like it. It's a risk, right, with every activity. Still, you're giving it a 4, so I'm going to say you have high hopes. Okay, so these are great. So Michelle agrees, yes, love it for exam review. Jose says this can help connect content from different courses within our program, and what a gift you're giving the students if you can apply this to classes they've already had and help them connect your course's information to stuff they've already learned. That is really getting them to become experts in a field and really understand your content area as a whole instead of just course by course. I think that's a brilliant idea. So I'm loving those. Right, there are still some people that we are not hearing from. If you are willing to chat in, I would love to see your contributions. Okay, but we've now covered 3 different ideas, and I'm gonna challenge you guys. We're gonna unmute you, and I want you to think about one that you are particularly drawn to, and if you will share the tweaks that you might use to make this work in your own class, within your own content area. Now, here's the thing. You might think, why would I have anything to learn from a person who teaches a class that's totally different from mine? But you'll be surprised. Sometimes, because of our own areas of expertise, we will understand and think of an application that maybe somebody in a different content area wouldn't. So I really love this part, and I want you guys to take the opportunity to share a favorite. So I'll start with note-taking pairs. And Jared, have you unmuted? Everybody? Okay, so everyone's unmuted. We had our lowest ratings on note-taking pairs. Is there anybody who wants to take a crack at it and share something that they think they could use from note-taking pairs? Anyone? All right, it's okay if not. I knew that that was a dicey one. Oh, we had somebody? What? Oh, Liz, it looks like you're trying to speak, Liz, but we are not hearing you. If you can get closer to your microphone or maybe turn your audio up a little.
No, I wasn't trying to say anything.
Okay, all right, sorry.
I was just moving, getting off chat so that I could see you.
Gotcha. Well, I hear you, and sometimes, you got to slurp your water and it makes your mic go. So, okay, so it looks like no one wants to support note-taking pairs, that is totally cool. Let's try gallery walk. Anybody want to share how they have used or could use or what they like about this? What about gallery walk?
This is Charlene.
Hi, Charlene.
Okay. Like I said, I remember you using it in the workshops. And my issue is that I'm giving them information so they can draw drawings. And I'm trying to figure out which one of these would be the best for me to use, and I'm thinking this one would probably be the best because I've given them a lot of information. They're working on software, and then they got to create drawings, and I get a check from them when they get the drawing complete. So I'm trying to figure out. I'm kind of iffy on all of them, but I think maybe this one may be the closest one for me to use.
Yeah, so if you have several drawings that you're attempting to get them to complete, you know, you could put a request for one type of drawing on one, another type of drawing on another, or I imagine if you just have one drawing you're trying to get them to complete, maybe one aspect of it on one poster, another aspect of it on another poster. Maybe one poster isn't even the drawing, but you could ask them for their starting points. Like, where does your logic have to go? Where do your thought process have to go before you attack the drawing? So maybe walk them through being an expert in how you draw. You know how you attack a problem like that. So give them step by step, and then as they rotate around, they get a sense for how an expert attacks the problem of drawing. So it might work really well for you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Jose.
Hi, Jose.
Hi. I do. We use a case study. Where they're in groups, everyone's reading the same case study, and there are several questions to address for each for that particular case. The groups finish talking. We'll take turns and let one group discuss what they, have their answers, and then the second group will add to theirs, and we'll go around until we've got a great picture of how you would address that case.
Oh, so this might work for that. It would just be a different format of the same problem, give them a little time to walk around. And also, one of the things I like about this is being able to look at what others have said about that case study and then chime in more, either agree or disagree. And sometimes if your group really has no idea of where to start, if they've got a prompt from another group, that can be really helpful. Sandra chatted in, so Sandra says she likes that it gets students up and moving, thinking in new ways together. So did I miss anybody else? Jose, I already went through that one. Okay, so, but yeah, I think that this really lends itself to a case study approach or a process. If you're trying to teach a process, I think that can be really valuable. Or conflicting ideas, right? If you've got one approach on one wall and a totally different approach on another wall, then they can kind of compare and contrast. So anybody else want to share on the gallery walk, or should we move on to clustering?
I guess the only thing I would chime in with is what I had written about the mobility impaired students. I think I'd have to I have a lot of students with mobility impairments and other impairments. I think I'd probably have to modify it so that the paper moved, but not the people.
That's a brilliant way to handle that, Liz. I love that idea. So yeah, if you have either the ability for you to rotate the papers around or to say, hey, each time I call stop, can I get a volunteer who will walk the paper to the next group and you guys just stay put? That would be a beautiful way of handling that issue. And I think that's a great thing to remind us that people with different abilities, we need to prepare for that in our course planning. And the staff office can be hugely helpful. If you have something you really want to do and you have no idea how to present it, for people with specific accommodations, they can often share great ideas with you. So thanks for bringing that up, Liz. I'm sorry I missed it. I didn't see it on the chat. Cool. So clustering, thoughts?
This is Jose again.
Hi, Jose.
I definitely understand the value of this type of making connections between content and what it provides the student in terms of learning, but it's always a very hard thing to implement in a classroom, especially one that's moving really quickly. So I think that I've never heard of this particular technique, so I'm pretty excited to be able to try something like this. I'm not exactly sure how I will do it, but I think this is one that I definitely I'm going to try very soon.
All right, well, when you do, let me know how it works, because I'd love to share your, best practices with everybody, because I think that's really the power of these kinds of things. Once you figure out how you can use it, in the next section, there's one, they have a suggestion for, I do it completely differently, so you might do something that's really new. I imagine you could provide clusters if students couldn't get started. You could say, here are the big themes. See if you can find your partners that go under these themes, and maybe that would be a good first clustering activity so they understand what the goal is, and then in future ones, you could make them come up with the overarching themes. But there's a lot to explore here, so.
Definitely.
With clustering?
Missy, since I've already confessed that I use this, let me share how I do it, and maybe someone can make some suggestions since I've had such mixed results.
I'd love that, Carrie. That would be great.
But I have used a deck of cards, and on each one of the cards, I either put the name of a drug or a category or the group that it belongs to. Okay. Then I distribute those cards randomly to the students and ask them to go around and match them according to their drug, the category, and so on. And maybe because I'm using it primarily for the antimicrobial, that's a large group, and there's a lot of drugs, and it takes a lot of coordination among the students before they finally get it put together. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking perhaps I need to do it in smaller groups of drugs, and then maybe a larger group eventually, but that's how I've used it.
I like that idea. I think maybe starting small, providing a little scaffolding for your students, so the first time they attack this activity, it's not with a hugely broad area. Maybe if you pick some, like you said, drug classes that have fewer drugs within each one for the first time. Another thing that comes immediately to mind is to make sure that you give them that time for preparation. I don't know if you're doing that or just walking into class and saying, y'all did the reading, you should be ready to go on this. But that can sometimes help, because a student who feels like, oh crud, I don't even know what I've got, they're going to be hard-pressed to connect up with anybody. But if you give them time to look at it and get some ideas, you can say, hey, I know something about my drug, and here's what I could tell you. Let's see what you know about your drug, and then we can see if they make sense. Does that seem like it might be good, or you might be giving them that prep time already?
Well, yeah, and I think that may be the key, is the group that liked it, I think they did have more prep time to be ready to put it together.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe just think about, we would love for our students to show up completely prepared, but giving them 3 minutes to review material on a tiny little segment is probably not that bad for class use, class time use. So maybe give that a try. Anybody else have suggestions for Carrie? Oh, sorry, someone's chatted in. Thank you, Jared. Okay, so Nancy says, oh, she uses it with students getting to know each other, but hasn't used it with content. And you could try it with boring or dry content areas. Absolutely. Anybody have any suggestions for Carrie's challenges with this method? Or anybody want to share additional ideas? All right. Well, I'm going to move on then and give us the chance to jump into the next chapter. What? Oh, yeah, that'd be great. So Jared's going to mute everyone again. Remember, of course, you can chat or unmute yourself. Okay, so chapter 4 is academic games. This is a word-heavy slide that mostly I shouldn't be showing you, but I'm going to send it to you so you'll have it. But the big deal here is that some people just at first glance hate the idea of using games in the class, and some love it. But what I'm going to say is this doesn't have to be a light activity. All it is giving students a goal that they're going to try to reach. So really the big deal about a game is it's goal-directed and it has some rules, which really, if you think about it, is basically any activity that you'd be doing in class. And since games have that kind of lighthearted feel to them, you can really make use of that and get your students engaged. So the big picture on this research on effectiveness is that one big meta-analysis found that either games were the same as traditional instruction or they were a little better than traditional instruction. But then a more recent, larger meta-analysis concluded that games actually have really strong and pronounced benefits. So with cognitive abilities, interpersonal abilities, those soft skills that we keep being told employers are looking for. And then this more recent meta-analysis showed that there was no evidence for adverse outcomes. So at worst, you're going to be getting the same outcome. At best, you're going to be improving, so much like the reciprocal peer teaching. So I encourage you to consider this method, even just to give your students a break from the norm. So I know you probably haven't had time to read everything here, and I'm demonstrating worst possible teaching practices, but I mostly want to get to the fun stuff, so I'm going to do that. And we will cover more research. So here are the best practices. We'll go through these kind of briefly. Finding one is that you need to give instructional support. The idea is that if you try to teach new content through a game, you will probably have worse outcomes than if you teach new content, either through readings or through a lecture or whatever you do, and then reinforce that material with a game. It's important to recognize that sometimes when you're posed with a set of rules, with a goal, and you really don't know the material well at all yet, it can be hard to incorporate all of that at once. So rather than overtaxing our students, you want to give them a basis in the information and then challenge them with a game. So that's the big deal there. Finding two suggests, again, collaboration improves the student experience. Well, we've just been talking about collaboration. We already heard that, grouping students together is valuable. But in particular, when it comes to academic games, if you feel like you are responsible for answering challenging questions all by yourself, it can actually cause some negative outcomes. Students feel uncomfortable, they feel stressed. And so if you give them the opportunity to work in groups, you tend to see a better outcome. And we want this to be positive. We don't want this to be a stressful experience. Who wants a game to be terrifying, right? So again, consider allowing students to participate in groups or even in cooperative games rather than competitive games. Finding three, the research suggests that the people who have the best reaction to a game are the people who win. And the people who have the worst reaction are the people who lose. So if you can stack the deck somehow so each group gets to win once, maybe that's a great way to go. But rather, the authors of the book suggest maybe considering not doing super competitive games or making it so that everybody will win at some point. Like, we're going to wait until everybody has accomplished this task. So you want to just make sure you're aware of this. Think about what your goal is. Think about if there's a way to ensure that everybody gets a positive emotional response to the game, or whether you should just ditch the whole idea of winners or losers. So I'm wondering, are there any questions on finding one or two yet? Or three? All right, so again, these are just guides, and I think so far, a lot of these probably are intuitive. You probably have a sense of these things, but it's good to see that they're supported by the research. So finding four is that feedback is critical. Even if you use all the rest of the best practices, you teach the content first, you give students a chance to collaborate, and you make it non-competitive. If you are doing all of that, but then there's never a point at which you say, yeah, that was right, or wow, that's not the way I would have attacked it, students are missing out on a hugely important component. So you don't just want to let students play the game all by themselves. You want to get them engaged in a game where you, as the expert, are providing feedback. You can do it during the game, you can do it after the game, you can do it in both times, but students really do need some feedback when they're playing games for them to be valuable. So just keep that in mind. Anytime you're going to employ a game, make sure you're giving students the benefit of your expertise. Don't just let them go it on their own. Okay? So any questions on these 4 best practices? So we want to make sure they are, we consider the competitiveness aspect. We want to make sure we give feedback. We want to make sure that the students have had time to prepare for or experience the material before giving them the game. And we want to consider making them collaborative or group games. So anybody? All right. So we're going to cover the ideas. I've got, again, 3 for improving academic games. So the 3 I've picked, and I'm going to just kind of jump right into presenting them so that we can make the best use of our time. But scavenger hunt, which a lot of you may have attempted before, but I think it's valuable, and the authors do a good job of sharing how to do that. There's the Who Am I game, and then Houston, We Have a Problem, which I had to pick because Houston's in Texas, so there you go. So we're going to start with scavenger hunt, and we'll move through the other 2. And again, the format is exactly the same, and I would love for you to gut check yourself so we can get a sense of how people are responding to these. So scavenger hunt, you essentially give clues or things that you want students to find that are related to your course content, and then you set them loose. And again, I'm going to encourage you to do this in groups. So each group has the same list or a different list, but you're not setting people to do this all by themselves. So the preparation is you create a list of tasks. So I know that they're using this in student development in some of the classes to get students familiar with all the services on an ACC campus. So maybe the list of tasks is find the library, get a librarian to sign your sheet. Find the advising office, get an advisor to sign your sheet, whatever. So it can be tasks like a typical scavenger hunt, or you can ask them questions about course content. Where was the first psychology laboratory? Which drug would be best for treating this kind of problem? Which picture, find an example of something from the Baroque period. So whatever you want to do, but you just create a scavenger hunt based off of it. And if you've done a scavenger hunt in the past, you can even challenge students to come up with something that they want their classmates to find. So as a take-home assignment, you could say, go find some important stuff and make a list. Give me 1 task I can put on our scavenger hunt. If students have already experienced this before, they'll know what you're talking about, and they can generate the list instead of you having to do it. If you want to make it competitive, you can come up with points and all of that, but otherwise you can just say, hey, let's see how many of these you can find. And then the process, when you get to class time, you distribute the hunt list, you put students in groups, you go over the rules, you let them go. And at the end, it's nice to give your students a chance to talk about which pieces of information were harder to find, or things that they found surprising when there was a question and they were like, whoa, I was blown away by this answer. I wouldn't have expected that. So you can really get a good sense of how students are handling your course material by giving them time to share their experience of the scavenger hunt. So I've seen people do this in a computer lab and ask students to find articles that support their position or anything like that. So there's so many ways you could use the scavenger hunt. So if I've explained it well enough, please send me your rating for the gut check. If I haven't, please ask me a question, and we'll see how this one works for you guys. So Kerry gets his students to locate items in a clinic as a scavenger hunt. That's cool. And then also as an icebreaker to get students to know each other. Sandra says it's very valuable, especially in an area of curriculum for kids. Cool. So Liz says she's used scavenger hunts but never as a team project, so that might be worth trying. Match different versions of functions. So Terry, if you can clarify for me, so for math, so different math functions. And Liz, it said you'd raised your hand, so if you want to chat in, you can, or you can unmute yourself, whichever you want to do. Graphs, equations, and tables that are the same. Cool, okay, so you are getting them to almost do clustering through the scavenger hunt. I love that idea. So Helena likes that idea, Charlene loves it. Nancy needs to think about this. So Nancy, maybe your colleagues will have your back and give you some suggestions of how you can use it when we get to that collaborative portion. Okay. All right, so it seems like you've got a sense of what it would take to create a scavenger hunt, and you can challenge your students to one of these if that works for you. So the next idea, just checking my time, holy smokes, is who am I? It sounds like this is about a person, but it can be about a fact. It could be about a drug. It could be basically about any bit of content that you're interested in. And so what you're going to do is you're going to give a concept or a name or an image on a card to a student or a group of students, and then they have the information. They get to prepare, they get to know what's going on with that information, and then the rest of the class is charged to ask yes or no questions to try to figure out what is written on that group's card. So your job as the instructor to prepare is to develop your list of cards for the gameplay. You write them down on individual cards. When you go to class, you give each student or each group a card. You give them a few minutes to prepare, and then you say, all right, team one, and people will ask questions. So I've used this early on in the semester when we were talking about schools of thought in psychology, or even famous psychologists. And so students will say things like, are you more about thinking or more about sexual urges? And then, well, you can't do that. It has to be yes or no. But are you, do you focus on thinking? Yes or no. Do you focus on early childhood? Yes or no. And so it's sort of like playing 20 questions, but they narrow the scope and they eventually will figure out exactly what's on the card. And then you just go through each group or each student who has a card, and you can go through as many cards as you have time for. And so I think this is a really fun way to get students to take ownership for some material and to really get a sense of how to handle other students' questions. It's non-competitive because the goal is get everybody to the win, and you can do it in groups if you prefer. So again, I'd love to see your gut check on this. Tell me if you love it or hate it, and we'll see. So Liz thinks it's a fun review. Terry's not a fan. Hector kind of likes it. Helena likes this one. Cool. Sandra's a fan. Charlene likes it too. So cool, this one's getting some pretty good ratings. So be thinking, if you have an idea of how you might implement this, maybe you're going to be willing to share that when we get through the last one, which we've just got one more. Jose says he's done something similar for a test review before. Yeah, because it can be just a fact. It can be, a specific type of math problem. So someone could say, does it involve the quadratic equation? Does it have, negative numbers, whatever. Carrie says he's seen it used to identify disease, but it wasn't a really strong activity. So maybe, trying with a different kind of aspect of that tech might be more valuable. Okay. All right, so our last one, Houston, we have a problem. This one, basically, you are going to pose a problem for your students, but also provide them with artifacts that will allow them to solve the problem. So I think that that's kind of the big thing. We can very often ask our students to work in groups or individually to solve a problem, but the thing that's cool about this is you give them some things that should help them solve the issue. So for your preparation, you're going to figure out the problem to solve, and the authors suggest that it's important to pick a problem that has multiple solutions, because it'll get real boring real fast if everybody goes, yeah, we solved it this way. And of course, we solved it the same way because there's only one way to solve this problem. So trying for something that encourages divergent thinking rather than convergent thinking can be really valuable. You then select artifacts, items, bits of information, resources that can help them solve the problem, whatever you want to give them. And I really actually like this last suggestion. You can actually provide some red herrings, things that you know shouldn't be helpful, and either your students will become super creative and find ways to use those things, or they will have to identify not every fact is valuable to solve this problem, and that can be really useful too. So that's the prep you have to do. You've got to come up with your artifacts and come up with your problem. Then you just place students in the group, you give all the students the problem, and you walk around as they're working. And you offer suggestions. If you hear students are completely veering off into left field, you can say, whoa, whoa now. That's some weird territory, let's bring it back to here. Or, I see where you're going with that, but I'm going to encourage you to try a different tack. So you don't solve it for them, but you kind of guide them and make sure they're not doing completely crazy stuff, or let it go. Maybe they're going to solve problems you never even thought about. And at the end, you give each group time to report out their solution. You can even give groups the chance to say, oh, I love that, or I wish we'd thought of that, or wow, that was really unique. So you give them some time to really interact and think about the qualities of each solution. So I can see so many ways to use this, plus it's got a Texas city in it, so we had to go over it. But let me get y'all to do a gut check and tell me whether you're going to rate more towards the 1 side, we're not loving it, or more to the 5 side. Or ask questions too if you have them. Okay, so Helena says it's a little bit heavy on the prep side, but she likes it. Yeah, the cool thing is if you only give one problem, you only have to create 1 set of artifacts, and then you'll just distribute that to everybody. So that can make it a little easier. Nancy's liking it. Liz is kind of middling. Sandra's liking it. Terry says it could be interesting. Yes, I think Terry, I've heard some really cool uses of this with math problems and tools that you could use to solve a math problem, so that could be really valuable. Jose says before lab practicals, he worked an example for them to see, but asked them to tell them what to do for the patient, and then they figure out the things that are red herrings. That's cool. Yeah, so red herrings can be super valuable, especially in applied health sciences, vet tech, anywhere where you're trying to do diagnostics or select, things that are going to serve an individual case. There's always going to be misleading bits of information, and training our students how to tune that out can be super valuable. So Charlene likes it, and a smiley face, thank you. And Carrie says he thinks that it could be valuable for a number of things. Sandra says she's got a 4 for this, but she's focused on that scavenger hunt. So that's good. I'm down with that. So look, we've got a few minutes, and I want to get you guys to share your thoughts. Jared, if you can unmute everybody, tell me what you're thinking. I heard someone talking, but we kind of lost you. So if you want to pick a favorite, one that you rated highly, one that you're thinking about, and share how you might be able to use it in your class.
I like the who am I. I thought that would be good in, well, a number of ways. But, I teach course in drugs of abuse, so I could give all the different properties of the drugs and have them identify it. That might be a nice review.
Yeah. So they'll be asking yes or no questions to kind of hone in on the specific drug. That sounds great. What else?
ahead. This is Charlene.
Okay, Charlene, what do you think?
I like all of them. I like the scavenger hunt the best.
Okay.
Because I'm having to teach electronics, just the concepts of it, and maybe I can do it more in a fun way this way, by, you know, dividing up what an atom is and all kinds of things like that. But I always have to share my game that I have, the snap circuit game that I use when we're doing schematic drawings, and they're able to use that snap circuit to familiarize them, and they get into groups of 3s, and it's way in the beginning of class, and they start to know each other, and they're playing this game together. Nobody wins, nobody loses, but somebody turns the light on, somebody turns a fan on, and all kinds of things. So I love games.
Yeah. Well, I think that's super valuable, and you're kind of demonstrating some of the best practices that we heard about the whole, it's a cooperative game, it's not a competitive game, and people are learning with each other, and those things are super valuable. I think that's great. Okay, so Hector says he agrees with Charlene. I'm looking, Sandra sent in, find a living item on campus that has obvious seeds. How could this item provoke learning and curiosity in a 4-year-old child? Cool, so give 3 examples. So you could actually get students to start engaging with the idea of the people that they're going to serve in their career. I love that idea. I think that sounds super cool. All right, so Sandra says, find a machine on campus that might catch the attention of a child. Brainstorm, how can we learn about the machine and what it does? I love this. So you're giving specific tasks, but in a whole bunch of different areas. So you get them to look for one item and you ask them a specific, brainstorming question about that specific item. So this is a really creative way to do it. You're not even going specifically with course content or finding something that will serve them, but exactly how they're going to work with the people that they're eventually hoping to help. I just think that's super cool. Anybody want to mention Houston or Who Am I? We had one person on Who Am I.
This is Helena. Can you hear me?
Hi, Helena. Yeah.
So, I'm thinking I like using Who Am I for helping students make distinctions between different concepts that are similar or related or easily confused. So I'm thinking about a series of emotions and how there are 2 in particular that students tend to confuse. And so really highlighting those distinguishing features during the game, I think could be really helpful.
Yeah, I love that because, you think about the tasks they're going to be required to handle on your assessments, right? If you know that students have struggled distinguishing between these 2 different things before, and you can give them actual class time to practice that, and maybe they're going to go down the wrong path with their questions, and then they'll, oh, wait, you're getting a lot of no's. This isn't that, I love that. I do. I think that sounds great. So what else? What other kinds of things do you guys think you could do? Anybody on the Houston bandwagon?
Yeah, this is Jose. I definitely am on the Houston bandwagon. I think that's my favorite one of mine. But as I mentioned, it's just something that allows students to be able to distinguish. The intent is to distinguish what isn't really that important to solving a problem to, focusing on what is important and why there's that distinction between the 2. And that's the way that I've used it in getting students ready for lab practicals.
Cool. Jose, do you tell your students that there's going to be extraneous, useless information, or do you let them figure it out? I'm just wondering how it works.
They don't know. We give them as complete a picture of the patient as we can, leaving in anything, actually leaving in everything. So they have to parse out the irrelevant information.
So do they have an aha moment where they go, oh my gosh, there's stuff in here that's useless?
Yes, and that's kind of, I did it once by accident and realized that I really liked it, and so I've kept doing it. But yeah, that seemed to prepare them well in knowing, what really is useful information for each of these lab tests coming up and what really isn't going to help them.
That's really cool. I like that. I really do. So I think that's a super thing. Let them make the discovery. Sometimes giving students the chance to take ownership of information and they feel like they're the ones who figured it out, that's super reinforcing, and it makes them feel like they've got a handle on the material in a way that if you just tell them, it doesn't do the same thing. So I love that. All right, so hopefully you guys have some cool ideas that you are going to think about implementing, and I would love it if you try one of these things. I would love to hear about it, so shoot me an email. It's fctl@austincc.edu. I'll show it in a minute, but I just want to mention a couple of things before we head out. First, please, 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 if you haven't already, make sure you chat in your name and your email address. We need to know who is here so we can give you development credit. And also, we're going to be doing a book giveaway. So the book that we are covering during this whole Computerside chat, I actually just got news from one of the authors. He's going to circulate it to all of his co-authors, and we're going to have signed copies that we're going to give away. So every Computerside chat event that you attend, you're getting basically a virtual raffle ticket. And at the end, we're going to give away several copies of this book that'll be signed by the authors. So please, please, please make sure we have your email so we can get you your raffle ticket and so we can get you your professional development credit. And then the other thing is I want to mention our next session is coming up pretty quick. And some of you may not be able to make it because it'll be on a Tuesday. I believe it's next Tuesday, April 5th, and I think it's from 3 to 4:30. And I'm just mentioning that now because if you go to the Computerside chat URL, this one right here, the author, one of the authors, Todd Zakryzek, he's going to be here with us. And so he's going to be participating in the WebEx with us and chatting about some of his favorite ideas, and you'll get to kind of interact with him. So if you are available at that time, if you liked this format, then consider joining us on Tuesday for chapters, I believe we're doing 5 and 6. And then also, just if you haven't been familiar with the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning before, that's the organization that I'm helping to direct here at ACC. We are run by a really large advisory group of almost 20 faculty members, split between adjuncts and full-timers, and they help me prepare all of the ideas that we're going to present to people, and they're all this kind of idea where we're going to share with each other, where we believe that faculty are the best educators of other faculty, and so a lot of collaborative work in person, on your campuses, online, all of that. So if you're interested in doing more of this kind of thing, take a peek at our URL there. And I just am grateful that you guys were willing to come. I hope you found it valuable. And I will be sending out an electronic eval because we're required to evaluate every session we do. And since you're not with me, I can't give you a piece of paper. So you will be getting an anonymous evaluation through your email. And I think I'm planning on sending it out Monday to give me time to get it all prepped for you guys. But be looking for that. And I'd really appreciate it if you'd participate in the evaluation so I can improve this for future sessions. Oh, okay. So if you are call-in user 3, if you can please tell me who you are. It's looking like you were not able to chat in, and we want to make sure we give you credit. So there's that. And we're going to go ahead and unmute everybody. If you have any last comments or questions, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate you being here, and thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Sandra. Very helpful.
Oh, good, Helena. I'm so glad. That's awesome. We're getting some info from folks. So, Sandra, are you saying that you're call-in user 3?
No.
Okay, no, okay. You were just chatting in your name, so we'd have it. Awesome.
Yes.
Nancy's given me a suggestion. Oh, that's a good idea. Nancy's giving me a suggestion that we should play some background music when we're waiting to start so everyone knows that we're actually here. Good point. Thank you. That's great. I will absolutely try that next time. Charlene is pleased that we don't have to drive home from here. I do. Womp womp. All right. Well, you guys, thank you so much. Hey, if before you check out, if you will, again, touch base with me about your feelings about us sharing this after the fact. If I could share this video, or if that would bug you, given that you now know the kinds of contributions you made, would you be comfortable with other people being able to see a video of this event or not? If you'll chat that in and let me know, that'd be awesome. And otherwise, if you're willing to chat in, let me know your thoughts on the consent issue, that'd be great. And otherwise, I'm going to say thank you so much. And look for those evals and let me know what I can do to help, and share with me if you use these. There's my email address right there on that page. So, all right. Thank you guys so much. I'm seeing several of you say it's all right if we share it, but that's great to know. All right, I'm going to stick around in case anybody has questions or wants to chat in anything. I'm going to stay here for a few, but you are free to go as long as you've chatted in your contact info so we can give you credit. And again, thank you so much. I am enjoying the heck out of these sessions, and I hope you guys do too. Sweet comments, you guys. Thank you.